Always a wild week of the year, Super Bowl week. I saw Debo Samuel wearing an Eagles jersey. Well, we'll talk about him and his future with the 49ers. Probably be speculating about whether or not Myles Garrett's going to be wearing a 49ers jersey. And of course, we can talk about Robert Saleh, who, since the last time we did one of these Q&As for the San Francisco Standard, he has joined the 49ers. I should say rejoined the 49ers. They have gotten their great defensive coordinator back, and that is the main domino to have fallen so far in this offseason. So, Tim, I think you're in Salt Lake City covering the Warriors, right? How's it going?
It's good in Salt Lake City. It was warm yesterday evening, but I think it's cooling off a little bit. A little basketball game coming up. Got some trade deadline things, but never mind to do dual sort of avenues here. We got a couple different paths here. Jump in on 49ers, but yeah, I'll be at the Warriors game just in a little bit.
So, speaking of the 49ers this offseason, at this time last year, we were in Vegas. The Super Bowl was a few days away. So, completely different cadence to the offseason. This year, I guess they did fire a defensive coordinator last year, but it wasn't until after this point of the year. Steve Wilkes was still on the staff heading into the Super Bowl. This season, the 49ers undergoing bigger coaching staff changes, and they've already gone through a whole pursuit and successful re-signing of Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, which I think we both agreed the last time we talked. They were going to have to get this right. They have missed now 2 straight times at that coordinator position, and they've seen the defense slide along with those misses all the way down toward the bottom of the league in 2024. So Saleh's back. I think, Tim, it was interesting seeing what he did with the Jets with Jeff Ulbrich. I thought that he evolved over his time. He had to. He had different personnel with the Jets than he did with the 49ers. He blitzed a little bit more in a couple of those years. But I think that at the core of his essence as a defensive coordinator, he still is the same guy who's going to be trusting the front four, working different mixes into the back seven. And I think Kyle Shanahan wanted that familiarity. He wanted that energy. I think you wrote about that, the energy being the key thing. And I think that at the end of the day, this is still the same Saleh that the 49ers last had in 2020, which is why Kyle Shanahan, Nick Bosa said Kyle's resting easy now. And I could see Kyle Shanahan resting a lot easier now that Robert Saleh is back under contract.
Yeah, I think we saw that they really focus on Saleh more than I thought they would have. I thought
Mm-hmm.
Ulbrich could have been a candidate, some others, and they kind of tested it, right? I mean, he could have gotten a head coaching job elsewhere, and then I don't know what they would have done. I think they put a lot of money down. I've written that Jed York was personally involved. At least, he would have had to allow them to offer like maybe top of the market defensive coordinator job salary, and they just wanted to get it back in order. They didn't want to take a chance. They didn't want to get a first year coordinator. They didn't want someone who doesn't run their system. If Saleh had turned him down, they might have had to go on there, but they really focused on Saleh, waited it out. I had heard they were getting antsy. I definitely heard they were getting antsy because he could have taken the Jacksonville job. Theoretically, if Liam Cohen doesn't end up doing a U-turn, turning him down, then coming back and taking it. There could have been another spot for Saleh. They really wanted to make Saleh feel like this comeback, and even more than he was, I think, after he left in 2020. I think he comes in as you are the defense. You are it. We've gone through some things where Kyle had to jump in there a couple times, call timeout during his Super Bowl, right, with Steve Wilkes when he didn't like what was going on. They don't want that to happen anymore. They don't want, as it goes into the Bosa resting easy. Like Kyle he had to worry about the defense the last 2 years. Yeah, especially I think last year with the first time, position coach raised up and to be a coordinator. They don't want Kyle to be having to go through that. Kyle didn't want to go through that, and Saleh was their answer, and they had a bet on it. They had to wait on it. They're putting their money on it, but they did get it done. So I think they feel very, very relieved and feel like that was the biggest piece they had to answer. Now, there's another really big piece, David. I'm sure people ask him, Brock Purdy's contract, but in the coaching sense of it, locking in Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator was the biggest thing they had to get accomplished, and they did.
I feel too that it might have been his recommendation that helped lead them to Brant Boyer,
Yep.
who was the
Yep.
special teams coordinator of the Jets before Robert Saleh was even there. Since 2016, he's had some really good special teams units, and It just so happened that Boyer interviewed with the 49ers right as they were wrapping up the contract with Robert Saleh. Anybody that can survive multiple coaching staffs as a special teams coach, I know that Trent Baalke was able to survive multiple coaching staffs as a GM. That's a different thing, though. Trent Boyer had to know what he was doing, and I think the results with the Jets speak for themselves. They had so much roster upheaval with so many new staffs, and he delivered, I think, 3 top 5 special teams units over that time since 2016. So we talked about this last time, though. The 49ers are going to have a newfound top-down focus on special team success if they don't want that to be at the bottom of the league on a consistent basis. My example is Kyle's got to call a punt, fake punt
Yep.
once a season.
Yep.
There's got to be something that shows that they believe special teams can be a tool to win a game instead of just not losing it, right? And I think if they give that to Brant Boyer, if they give that mentality to Brant Boyer, he's shown that he could field a good unit on special teams.
I agree. Could not agree more. Yeah, a fake punt, a fake field goal, something different, just to let them know the coach cares about special teams, that he's involved in the plotting and the planning. And I do think, it might be an overread, might be accurate. I think being able to bring Boyer, if he really did, you have to assume that Saleh was involved in the hiring to some extent. It will show some more influence. I think Saleh's going to have a lot of influence. I think they want him to have influence. I think he's had personnel influence on draft and free agency when he was the 49ers first time. I think he's got even more now. And maybe they give him a draft pick or two in the first couple of days. Maybe they give him a free agent. Go get whoever. Probably not at the top end. That's Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. But I think the special teams guy coming from his staff as he's coming in is just a sign that Robert Saleh is coming in kind of as a real influence in the organization, and that is coming from the top down. Jed York, again, as I heard, Jed York wanted Robert Saleh as a defensive coordinator and was willing to put up the money for it. And as you know, the most important thing an owner can do is put the money up for it.
And look at the results in New York. Obviously, he was fired because of overall team performance. But if you break it down into how the defense performed, especially when he was there, it was really good. He inherited nothing. They were terrible that first year defensively. And then he built top 5 units his second year, his third year, and then all the way up until he was fired early in his 4th year. The Jets had a top 5 defense. And then it plummeted right after he left. So that shows you that Saleh had a huge hand and obviously had a hand in personnel there as well. I don't think he had final say, but there were several former 49ers who I think not coincidentally joined the Jets. Javon Kinlaw, Solomon Thomas, Isaiah Oliver was there, although he didn't overlap with Robert Saleh with the 49ers. But who else was there and is going to be a free agent in March alongside Solomon Thomas and Javon Kinlaw is DJ Reed, the cornerback. Yep. He was the one that got away, right, in 2020 from the 49ers. I wouldn't be surprised to see one or more of those players sign on with San Francisco this year. I mean, they've got needs at all those positions. Defensive tackle, definitely. And cornerback, I mean, it's just a gaping hole there. They only have 3 players under contract right now at cornerback. So they're going to have to add multiple bodies. And DJ Reed might be one of them, might be somebody who follows Saleh again, this time back to the 49ers.
Yeah, I don't know about Kinlaw. they put a lot of time into him and never could quite get healthy enough to be consistent. But maybe, who knows? Maybe there's something going on that the knee issues are gone. But
he's been healthy the past 2 years. That's the thing, right?
Yeah. I think
paying him what? They'd be paying him $2 million, $3 million. It wouldn't be like a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, exactly. It would be interesting if listen, if Saleh comes in and says this is a guy, then you trust him. That's what we're talking about with influence. And it might have been a way to knock out Ulbrich. You had Saleh run the defense, get fired, then Ulbrich take over as the interim coach and basically running the defense. I know he was a coordinator under Saleh, and it all fall apart. That might not have been the greatest recommendation for Jeff Ulbrich, who I know they really wanted to hire last year. Things change, context changes. Saleh wasn't available last year, but I thought Ulbrich would be right up there with Saleh this year, and he was not. It was clear that he was not. They wanted Robert Saleh back. They wanted someone the players were familiar with, who would run a system that they were familiar with, and they just wouldn't. I heard 2 things: high energy, that's what they wanted, And two, they wanted someone the players could feel comfortable with. And clearly, Robert Saleh was the guy who topped out on all those categories. And now we'll see them play. We'll see. They want to be healthy. They want. We'll see who they add, and there's a big name out there that might be on the trade market. I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think there is a sense that the defense needs a lot of attention. Saleh does it, and then Kyle can get to running the offense, because the offense took a dip too last year. Offense gained yards, but did not score. They 6 points less a game, 6 points less a game last season than they did the year before. I think they feel like they have a lot of weapons, and they want Kyle to jump in there and get to going, and they want him to not to worry about the defense, and Saleh's going to take care of that.
Especially, and I think the disparity that you talked about on offense, that's the red zone, right? They had the yards, they didn't have the points. They would go from number one in the red zone to near the bottom of the league. Got a little bit better toward the end of the season, but never fully better, especially with any consistency. And I think that all ends up circling back to how they struggled to separate without Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey, when you absolutely need guys to separate and make plays where it's more condensed down in the red zone, that they weren't able to do it. And also, I don't think, it's all interconnected, right? It's hard to say cause and effect in football. Is it the play caller's fault? Is it the player's fault? I think it's a little bit of both. I think a play caller gets his mojo and is more confident and more inventive with his calls when his guys are separating. And then it works the other way, right? When guys do separate, then they make the call look better. So I think that it wasn't Kyle Shanahan's best work by a country mile. It definitely wasn't the talent's best work by a country mile. And the 49ers are hoping that all of that, all the variables are better next season. And I think that so much of it starts with them just taking a step back earlier this offseason. So much mileage, not only on the players, but for coaches. There was a lot of mileage there. Now they're figuring out exactly what the staff is going to look like under Shanahan, under Saleh, under Brant Boyer. That's not fully finalized yet. So we're waiting to see how the 49ers reset there, but they have more time now to reset, to face a last place schedule. So, we can go several different directions with this. By the way, those of you who want to ask questions, go ahead and head over to sfstandard.com. You'll see the live video happening there. Those are the questions that we're going to give priority to. Somebody has sent us a note from X. It's Adrian Tipple. He says, hello from the UK faithful. We say hello to the UK. What time is it there? Like 6 p.m. probably right now? No, maybe later. Yeah, it's probably
Don't ask me. I'm screwing up time zones like
yeah, you're in Mountain Time, and I think the UK is 7 hours ahead of you probably. So yeah, they're having dinner. So happy dinner time over in the UK.
Thanks for asking the question. If there's a question.
And I was thinking about hopping over to Myles Garrett, but we got our first question through the standard right now. What are Purdy's biggest priorities when negotiating his new contract? Do you think he'll be a career 49ers player? Well, I think that both sides certainly hope that he'll be a career 49ers player, because if that happens, that means that he has continued to play well for the 49ers. And I think that any team is out of their minds to let go of a quarterback who's delivering for you. So we'll just have to see how the future progresses there. But his biggest priorities when negotiating his new contract, for any player, it's securing guaranteed money. All right, that ends up defining whether or not a contract is team friendly or player friendly in the league. Is the amount of guaranteed money and how that guaranteed money is dispersed. Whether it's over 2 years or 3 years. When we look at a negotiation that I think a player has clearly won against the 49ers in the recent past, it's Nick Bosa's. I mean, Bosa's by APY, it remains an outlier, but also when you look at the guarantee structure, heavy guarantees heading into year 3 of the contract, which is relatively unusual, especially for a non-quarterback in the NFL. Anyway, I think the same goals would apply for Purdy when we talk about his biggest priorities entering this deal, Tim.
Yeah, I got to agree with that. I mean, guaranteed money is always the number, especially for quarterbacks. I've heard that both sides feel good about it, but that the structure might be a little different, and I don't know exactly what that means. I'm guessing that the 49ers are probably looking at, not looking like a super long-term deal, maybe, a 4-year deal. That other quarterbacks have signed really good 4-year deals, and maybe you can get out of it after 3. I think the Jordan Love deal is sort of similar to that. And if that's it, you're Brock Purdy. Maybe you think, okay, I want a high average annual value, and then I can go back at it in 3 years, and he'll be 27, right? I mean, like, these are how you have to kind of think about it with him. Protect himself by getting a high average annual. Protect himself by getting his high, a nice guarantee, and then the 49ers will want to commit super long. Okay, I've got some money in my pocket, and then I can go back out on the market, or they can franchise tag him, in 3 years, 4 years, or do a Dak Prescott and negotiate that they can't franchise tag you. I do not think the 49ers will do that, however, but because it really, really backfired on the Cowboys. But I would imagine it's not. I don't think Purdy's going to be the number one quarterback, nor will he seek that. He might ask that. There might be a report in its negotiations. You don't ask for the thing, you ask for more than the thing that you think you're going to end up with, and then you negotiate it down. I don't think it's going to be a crazy number. We'll see where the 49ers go. Maybe the 49ers go low. They have historically done that. Maybe not with a quarterback, but they've certainly started low with Bosa. They started low with Debo. They started low with Ayuk. Let's see if they do the same thing with Purdy. It's a different equation as a quarterback, because you kind of want him in all the OTAs. You want him in all the mini camp. You want him from the first practice at the training camp. And if that's not happening, David, you and I know that's going to be a circus. If Brock Purdy's not practicing, there will be a lot of discussion about this, going into
I think
the first. So we'll all know it. We'll all feel it. If he's out there and signed in May, they'll have gotten their two biggest things done quickly: getting the DC in that they like, and getting Purdy done. We'll see if that happens by May. I was thinking maybe they could get this done really quickly, but I have not heard a thing about talks. I don't think that's happened yet. Maybe just parameters, ideas. If it's done by March, that's still fast. Let's see if it's anywhere near that when we get to like March 15, or whenever the free agency starts. Right in there, free agency is going to be right in there somewhere. I think you might want to know what the price is going to be for Purdy before you go into free agency, but we'll see how the 49ers negotiate this, and we'll see where Purdy stands.
Well, I think you do need to know what the size of the salary cap is, which is based on NFL revenues, which is not going to come out to the end of February. I think that's probably the variable that you need to fill in before any substantive talks can happen. When they re-signed Garoppolo in 2017 or 2018, they were so awash in cap space. That was before they had any star players. They actually front-loaded the deal for Jimmy Garoppolo. I was just looking at that contract a few minutes ago, and he got over $40 million of cash flow in the first year. Back then, that was a huge amount, because they gave him a $28 million roster bonus, and they don't do that anymore. The signing bonus for Jimmy Garoppolo is only like $6 million. That was what they prorated over the 5 years. It was $1.4 million per year. Now they try to load up the signing bonus and then option bonuses, which are treated like signing bonuses. They do things completely differently, because now they're working with the opposite issue. Now they're trying to surf the wave of the rising cap and fit underneath the cap every single season. So, I tend to think that they'll want longer on the years, just because they're not going to be married to the back end of the deal. And maybe Purdy won't want that, right? Because you want to have that leverage.
Depends on what the bonus. Yeah, it depends on what the bonus is. What's the guarantee? I think the 49ers will be short of the guarantee initially that he wants. And so you spread it out whatever number of years, the guarantee is essentially going to work out to how many years this contract pays out for. So they'll probably say, we'll guarantee you essentially 3 years at, say it's 50. That's $150 million. They might not want to get there, and Purdy might want more than that. I think that's kind of be whatever amount of years they announce it as. It's going to be, what's the guarantee total, and how does that work over 3 years? Can they get out of it after 2? Can they get out of it after 3? What's the number that they can get out of it? Those are the numbers I think we're going to be all looking at.
And with Garoppolo, they were able to get out of it after 2. That's one of the most misunderstood deals. People thought that Garoppolo was holding him hostage with that deal, where he really wasn't. After 2019, they were really free to move on and look at other options, which is why we talked about Tom Brady in the 2020 offseason, then why they went out and they got Trey Lance in 2021. They had a lot of flexibility with Garoppolo to either keep him or jettison him, because they loaded it all up up front. I think that now, we saw it with Bosa, a superstar, the sign of a really good deal, like if we're going to look at this in a really rudimentary fashion, is to push a lot of guarantees all the way into that third year. Now, we're not going to talk about Deshaun Watson's deal because that was ridiculous. The Browns just decided to guarantee the whole thing. That's not going to happen in this case. It shouldn't happen with any other player. The Browns tried to set a precedent that nobody else is following. But in the case of Bosa, in the case of some of these big receiver deals that we've seen lately, that third year has some guarantees, like Justin Jefferson's, right? So I think that's going to be maybe the point of contention, right? That year three, to see if the 49ers will have an out after year two or after year three. Because as we know, 1 year, the difference of 1 year is a lot of time in the NFL. A lot can happen over the course of the year. So when a team is looking for more optionality, they want to be able to hit that eject button, or at least have the ability to hit that eject button after year two instead of year three.
You bring up Debo. That was a big deal with Debo, the negotiations, and we're getting to year three, I believe, with that extension, and they can get out of it. Like, that's how these things are played, and the guaranteed money is the deal. That's why we talk about the guaranteed money is what the deal really is, because teams can start to get out of it once the guaranteed money starts trickling away, and we'll see that. It's quarterbacks get a lot of guaranteed money. This is the deal. He's the one who's up. They traditionally like to get the quarterback who's up to get the biggest deal. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I don't think it's going to even be close to that. But maybe that's the number that's floated early on. And I'll say, 49er fans, you can get alarmed if you want. There's going to be some things out there maybe that don't sound great early on, but then that's what negotiation is for. And I do think they're more motivated to get this done, so at least than the Ayuk one. Even they said they wanted to get that done fast. They did not get it done fast. So the Purdy thing might be something where they're going to have to get a feel for it, and both sides, Purdy's side, can get a feel for it at least by the end of March to have a feel. Where is this really headed? That's not too far away from now, though, David. Like, we'll get a sense of it pretty soon, I think.
There will be two scales that will be the most commonly used to judge this deal when it comes through, just to prepare people, summarize things. APY, average per year, that's where Dak Prescott is at the top at $60 million per year. You've got other quarterbacks like Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow are amongst the top five there. They're all in the 50s. And then there's going to be fully guaranteed money. And that one is crazy because that's where Deshaun Watson tops the list by almost 100 million. He's at 230 million fully guaranteed. I think Burrow is number two on that list. I think he's at around 140. And you've got guys ranging from 120 to 140. That's where the top of the market really is. We can toss Deshaun Watson out as an outlier, and we can look at the fully guaranteed money. And then we'll end up seeing where Brock Purdy fits in. APY is going to be it. I have had conversations with agents about this, and I always ask them, I see all this funny money at the end of deals. Why does everybody care so much about APY? And an agent will tell you, well, it's just players like to feel valued. So they want to be able to say, yeah, I'm better than Dak Prescott, so I want to be making a little bit more than Dak Prescott. They like that outward appearance of value. So yes, it is a little bit of a vanity number. And two, agents use the APY that they're able to negotiate for their player as an advertisement for other clients, right? So they could say, hey, I got Brock Purdy this deal worth $59 million a year, whatever it is. And he could use that to sell himself to other clients. So APY matters on the surface level, but I think that ultimately, as you said, it's the guarantees that really make these deals tick, because the guarantees are what are more closely correlated with structure. Ultimately, the 49ers and Brock Purdy want to find a win-win in which Brock Purdy has the guaranteed money that he was looking for, and the 49ers have the structure that they were looking for, so they can afford to build the team around him. And I wrote a whole contract projection on this 2 weeks ago. You can go check it out at sfstandard.com. But I basically showed the staggered structure that the 49ers could use to theoretically satisfy all parties, right? APY could still be high, but you're building a structure that lets you keep the cap hit down at around 15 million. I don't know exactly what the APY is going to be. I just wanted to toss a projection out there that shows that they can keep that year 1, 2, maybe even year 3 cap hit relatively low, so they could build the rest of the team around him.
Yeah, the one thing I think a lot of us are going to look at is when the over the cap does that, What's the dead money hit if they get out of it after year two? What's that
Hmm.
number going to be? That's a
Yeah, that's
huge
a big
number.
one.
Yeah, like what's that number going to be? Because that's what teams look at. Can we get it out? Because one bad year, okay. If it's 2 bad years, they're going to want to get out of it. Like this is what happened, Rams and Jared Goff, or whatever. And where are you on that number? And it's obviously up to Purdy in his camp to try to negotiate where they're protected in that year.
And the
So
Rams got out of it, but at a heavy cost that I think did hurt their team. I mean, they did find cap held. Now, credit to them, they rebuilt really well through the draft on that defensive side of the ball. Matthew Stafford is obviously a solid commodity, but that hurt the Rams and I think that they went all in 2021, but they weren't really firm contenders at all in 2022 and 2023.
yeah,
Now they're back, but there are costs to this. I think you're absolutely right when you look at the year 2 and year 3 exit. Like which one of those two it's going to be is going to determine who came out of this deal with the upper hand. So I think you have a really really good point with that. We talk about the rest of the team, and we mentioned Debo Samuel. So I mentioned this at the start of the show. He's over at Radio Row today wearing an AJ Brown jersey. It's the same agent, Tory Dandy. They're friends. I remember during the whole contract drama a couple of years ago, they were FaceTiming because they're both going for new contracts, along with DK Metcalf, who also has Tory Dandy as his agent. I think this is like the new thing, Tim, where these guys are always supporting their friends. But it was just funny to me. I mean, I think we were both in Philadelphia in December of 2023, where Debo Samuel was public enemy number one, delivered a vintage performance, scored multiple touchdowns. That was the big win for the 49ers. And it was after Debo had talked so much about James Bradbury and called him trash and all that. And now here we are 14 months later, casually at the Super Bowl, Debo Samuel wearing an AJ Brown Eagles jersey. That's not
it's
going to
all a
make
show.
shockwaves or anything on social media, is it?
It's a show. It's a great interest. It's a great conversation. Wide receivers tend to do it better than anybody else. I think sometimes teams like it. Sometimes teams get annoyed by it. Ayuk last year, I think he thought he was being funny, but making a point, and the 49ers were really pissed off with that stuff. Debo does his own thing. Debo has a little more pelts on the wall than Ayuk maybe, and he does his stuff in a competitive way. I don't think anybody's going to mind it, and it's kind of fun. It's fun to talk about.
It also is interesting to talk about his future here with the 49ers. He's entering the lame duck year of his deal, and the fact that for whatever reason, the production wasn't the same as it had been uh, in the season prior to this. Like everything seems to be on the table. 49ers obviously are talking about their commitment to Debo Samuel for this year, but they haven't talked about a commitment beyond that. I think that we all expect George Kittle to be extended this offseason. If Fred Warner continues playing at a high level, we'll expect him to be extended next offseason before the lame duck year of his contract. But Debo Samuel is in this in between no man's land where he didn't play well enough to be a no-brainer extension, but I don't think played poorly enough. And, there are also enough qualifying factors for why he played the way that he did. So it's not like, outright cut, outright trade. It's just, he's just in that middle ground right now. Where do you see this heading with Debo Samuel? Do you think the 49ers just leave this untouched? Let him play out the lame duck year and then figure it out? Do you think he's going to be a candidate for a trade before the deadline? It seems that it's really, really hard to get on to get a read on this situation, especially relative to the other ones.
Yeah, I think this was tough too because Kyle Shanahan, he's one of Kyle Shanahan's favorite players. Might be Shanahan's favorite player on the team. So I think maybe more so than other players. Buckner was a favorite receiver. He certainly scrutinized his receivers as much as anybody. Debo saved the 2021 season. Who knows what happens if that doesn't happen? Runs the ball, catches the ball. Obviously, had a really bad year last year. I think he had the issues, injury issues, and it just never really bounced back from it. There's several players like that we can name. I think he's a candidate to sign an extension, but at a lower level, like lower that number, and maybe he'll take offense. Juszczyk had to do that. Armstead refused to do that. But I think you kind of put a value on him, what he's going to be for them for the next 2-3 seasons. And if he will agree to a number, like let's say 18 to 20 million a year, I don't think he'd like to hear that, but that might be what he's actually worth. And if he doesn't take it, maybe they move on from him. I think it might be more in that let's talk to him and figure out a number. Juszczyk, I think, is a prime example of that. Just a guy they like having. They like having him in the locker room. They like having him around. They like the versatility they have on the field with him. But it was going to be at a lower number last year, and it might be again at a lower number this year. I think Depot certainly a more dynamic player than Juszczyk, and his own kind of guy might be a candidate for. Let's see if we can get a little over the next 2 seasons, and you feel like you have a little security. We have a little security with that number. I don't know that that's for sure going to happen. I think there was a lot of disappointment about the way he played. I think his weight got up there at the end of the season. I don't think they like that. But obviously, you get hurt, things happen like that, and he's given them a lot. And that was part of the negotiation. That's why it was so tough a couple years ago, is that he was getting hit so much as a wide back, and he knew that it might lessen his longevity in the league as a valuable player. So they're kind of in that ground now. Like, well, what does that mean? The past achievements count for something. Your closeness to the head coach counts for something. I think it comes down to let's see if those two sides can come to a meeting, maybe tack on another year, a little guarantee much or some of this season's money that isn't really that highly guaranteed, and then see if they can continue a relationship at a lower number. I think that seems right to me. And Debo might say, to hell with you, I'm going to go to the Eagles or whoever. But I think that conversation might be coming up in a little bit.
Well, he's got an option bonus that's due on March 22nd. So we might have some clarity as to exactly how they're going to proceed here within the next month and a half, because his base salary, because of the restructures they've done, is actually already at the minimum for this year, 1.17 million. You can't work on that anymore, but the option bonus is going to be a bigger chunk of change, I believe several million. It's hard to sift through this entire spreadsheet because they've restructured him, I think, 3 times already. So there's all kinds of numbers floating around. But the big chunk of money is going to be coming up in that option bonus on March 22nd. So that might spur some movement for the 49ers. And also, if you could rearrange deck chairs here if you do an extension, which is the only way to rearrange some of the salary cap deck chairs at this point, since you've already restructured everything that you could out of his contract. All you do in a restructure is you convert base salary to signing bonus and you push the hits out into the future. And they've already done that for every single season of Deebo Samuel's contract. It's funny because you look at it now, and every year, like literally every one of them is a veteran minimum base salary. So they've got to figure things out with that roster bonus or option bonus, whatever the bonus is going to be termed as, and it isn't set to kick in until March 22nd. So we'll keep our eyes on that on the Deebo Samuel front. Speaking of cap stuff, why don't we take a look at a couple more questions? We finally have a few more. Super Bowl prediction. Do you have one?
I don't go against Patrick Mahomes. It would be more interesting, I think, if you could. I think the Eagles are really talented. I'm a big fan. I think that late in the fourth. And David, you and I have seen what happens if you get into the Super Bowl and it's late and Patrick Mahomes is on the other side. It's hard for me to go against Patrick Mahomes. I'll say Chiefs by 3.
Yeah, so it's the last time they played, it was, I think, Chiefs by 3, right? Wasn't it 34-31? Mahomes ended up pulling it out at the end. I'm thinking about the differences between that Eagles team and this Eagles team. And that Eagles team didn't have Saquon Barkley. And he's had a CMC-like impact on Philadelphia. I think Jalen Hurts was playing better football back then. But again, now he's got Saquon, which has completely changed what his responsibilities are and how this offense is operating. The defense for Philadelphia is markedly different now. And it's interesting to me because when we talk about the 49ers revamping their defensive line, I think they've got to follow a similar model as the Eagles. They got way younger, Philadelphia did, and successfully got way younger somebody like Javon Hargrave, really symbolic of that. They said, hey, you've hit 30 years old and we're not going to re-sign you. 49ers, tried to squeeze in a couple of years of Javon Hargrave, older player. It's the total opposite strategy that the Eagles took. So this Super Bowl comes down to, in my opinion, does this revamped Philadelphia defense, which has been so good so far over the course of this season, are they ready for the true big time, for the prime time against Patrick Mahomes? On the field, do you remember the field scandal over in Arizona a couple of years ago? Philly complained that their pass rushers were neutralized. That's not going to be an excuse this time around. And it's essentially they went down to Athens, Georgia, and grabbed the entire defensive line there and made it their own. And it's been good so far this year with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Zach Bond. That linebacker has just come out of nowhere for the Eagles. They've got some really young players in the secondary. They have rebuilt this whole defense. It's been good during the season. Will it be good against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl? And I think if it's solid, I think they can win because they've got Saquon, and that, that's like their McCaffrey. If McCaffrey doesn't fumble last year, I think the 49ers win, right? You don't expect a player like that to make a mistake in a game like this. So I'm going to pick the Eagles just because I do think that they might be better than they were 2 years ago. But boy, it is hard to pick against the Chiefs because I've done that multiple times and been wrong multiple times, but I'm going to keep on doing it because one of these times it's going to hit, right? And I think it's hard to repeat, and I think that Philadelphia may be able to shock people this time around.
Just think of the feeling. Just think of the feeling you have when it's 17-14 Eagles and it's Patrick Mahomes is driving down the field, and you'll be going, "Oh, I'm betting against that guy." I just can't do it. Can't do it.
We got more questions here. Can the 49ers pay Purdy and Greenlaw simultaneously? Yes. I mean, the 49ers have plenty of room to pay a lot of people like right now. Like they've carried over the most cap space in the league. I have a whole worksheet that you can go check out. I tweet it out once every couple weeks or so. It's about building a sustainable roster, though. Unused salary cap space carries over from season to season. So far, they've done a fantastic job. They've paid more players big deals than any other team since Shanahan and Lynch have joined, and they're still not in salary cap hell. So that just gives you an idea, because other teams like the Saints, like the Rams, that they have crossed the threshold. They haven't managed it as well as the 49ers. So the 49ers would like to avoid that. They can absolutely pay Purdy and Greenlaw simultaneously. The question is, can you pay? It's a bigger picture mosaic. Can you pay these guys simultaneously while maintaining that salary cap feasibility, viability in the future? What type of deal do you see them offering Greenlaw? I think they'll offer him a year with incentives. And, I think, they're not going to offer a second year of guaranteed money in this deal. So I think even for Dre, he's going to want to be a free agent after this next season. So he has a chance to take another bite out of the apple if he has a good year. How big is it going to be? His last one was about $8 million per year. I think that you can run up a price up to $10 million, but have maybe half of that be incentive based to reflect the fact that he only played 34 snaps last season. So what do you think about that, Tim? 1 year, $5 million guaranteed, up to $10 million with incentives.
Yeah, another team might top that, and I think if you're the 49ers, you understand that, and he has to go for larger money. I don't think you can commit to somebody who only played 1/2 for you. However great that
losing Tim
was the year where they had injured guys, and they can't just say, "Let's go." If you're getting me here, and I'll just say I don't think the Purdy deal and the Greenlaw deal are related. They're just not. I mean, you have a certain amount of money. Obviously, that everybody's related to each other, but you got to get the quarterback thing done and then deal with everything else. You're not thinking, wait a minute, we can't pay this guy Brock Purdy because we got this Greenlaw deal coming. It's very separate. And as I keep saying, the cap hits for Purdy will not hit hard until like 2027. The way they do it is you pack it with bonuses and you spread them out over the thing. It's going to be like 15 or 16 the first year, 16 or 18 the next year. That's what you just look at every single quarterback who signed the big deal. That's how they do it. So they don't have to get jammed in that first year of the quarterback deal. And as the cap goes up, that's when the cap hits go up for the quarterback. Your number one highest paid guy. Almost every team will say that way. I think Greenlaw, some other team, Washington Commanders, Adam Peter knows them, and Peters knows him and feels like he can be a major difference, he might offer him a 2-year guarantee, might offer him something more for the 49ers and half for you. I think it's important for the locker room. It's important for them, but you do have to be a little fiscally, risk averse at some point with somebody who only played a half. And I think Fred plays better with Dre. I think Dre is such an important to them, but I don't know how healthy he's going to be. I mean, I keep going back to it, but he played that great half against the Rams, comes out and talks to us, and he can barely move, David. He could barely move. And I know it's the NFL. These guys go through a lot, but that kind of had me thinking, I don't know how much more he's going to play this season. He didn't play very much this season
Yeah,
after
four
that.
more snaps. Four more
Yeah,
snaps.
it's just so much context, so much, violence in this game, especially if you're Dre Greenlaw, especially if you're playing at the speed he's playing out. I don't know if another team comes up with more money than the 49ers, it might happen. But I think you're projected incentive laden, make sure he's protected for 1 year, and then see what happens after that. I think would be good for the 49ers for sure. We'll see if that's what the best deal he's got out there. We'll see.
Well, we do know, thanks to Nick Bosa, that Robert Saleh is very adamant about Greenlaw returning. Bosa said
You
that at
think so?
the Pro Bowl. So, and Saleh has pull, and that could have been some of what Saleh and Shanahan were talking about. Saleh was in position to make some demands, right? When the 49ers were negotiating with him. And I always think back to Mobile to Miami. Remember they were wearing those shirts after the NFC Championship game. So that meant that Robert Saleh and that coaching staff was working with those Senior Bowl prospects in January of 2019, already 6 years ago. Crazy. And two of the prospects they were working with are two of the guys that we've talked about most on this show, Deebo Samuel and Dre Greenlaw. So there's a reason why I think this staff's connection to those two players in particular runs deeper than it does with most players, and it's because they were part of the handpicking process of these players in the draft process. Not that often that you get to coach the Senior Bowl, and it's even more rare to coach the Senior Bowl, pick out a couple players, actually see them be drafted, and then have them lead a turnaround from the 4-12 season that got you coaching the Senior Bowl in the first place to the Super Bowl, right? I mean, and Deebo and Dre Greenlaw were both massive parts of that turnaround. Dre had the stop on Jacob Hollister in Week 17 against Seattle. And so I think that there is a deep connection here with Deebo and Dre Greenlaw, and rightfully so, because there's this really, really special shared history that the 49ers staff has with these players. And that's why Robert Saleh is very adamant that Dre Greenlaw comes back. And I will say this too, Tim, we can talk until we're blue in the face about him playing only 34 snaps last year. But the 34 snaps that we saw, I did not expect him to be that
It
explosive
was incredible. Yeah.
coming off the Achilles. And I think that counts for something, right? So you would hope that over the few months now that he has to recuperate and now truly build up that base of endurance, he could solve the endurance part. The fact that he already checked the explosiveness box, though, that's got to mean a lot in these negotiations.
I agree. And of course, I think Saleh would love to have his guys around. But you know what? I think they wanted DeForest Buckner if they could have back. They wanted Armstead, for cap reasons. We'll see with Greenlaw, when you add in the injury history. I personally would love to see Dre back. I think he's great in the locker room. Really, even as a real young guy, he was just a good guy to talk to. Thoughtful, emotional, says what he feels, but says it with real intellect and real kind of a bigger picture view of things. But you can't keep everybody. And so if there's another offer out there, I would say that there's two guys, and someone is mentioning about Hufanga here. Wouldn't Saleh want Hufanga back? You know what? Yeah, I think they do. But I've heard that one. There's a lot of interest for Hufanga outside. Like specifically, there's interest for him because that wasn't a Achilles. That was arm issues with Hufanga, I believe. And so I think you can picture him obviously playing a full season. I think they might lose Hufanga. That's not a position that they pay anybody. Have draft picks there. We saw how Malik Mustafa was as a rookie. They still have players there, and they can still draft players. I don't think if Hufanga's getting multiple year deal offers with some bonus money, I think that's one they might not be able to do.
Yeah, that's the vibe I get there too. He did fully recover from the knee. I thought he was
Mm-hmm.
moving fine by the end of the season. If he was compromised by anything, it was the club on his hand, right? And
Yeah,
that
that's what
was
I'm
with
thinking of.
the torn wrist ligament. So safety is an intriguing position because they struggled there last year, ironically, outside of the rookie, Malik Mustafa, who was really good. So all of a sudden, we were talking about Jair Brown being the potential foundational piece there coming out of the Super Bowl year in 2023. Now we're talking about Malik Mustafa as that person at safety, and Jair Brown needs to bounce back. And the wonder is, well, do they re-sign Hufanga? Are they going to find another veteran just in case Jair Brown continues missing tackles at the rate that he did last year? So this whole defense, I mean, they did finish in EPA number 26, number 29 against the run. That means that it was not a lot of flowers and roses on that defense. It was there were problems that they're going to have to solve heading forward into this next season. We got a couple more questions here. Somebody's saying that Javon Kinlaw was at the Sharks game last night. I wonder if he still owns a house in the Bay Area. That's interesting. With the success that teams that have good offensive lines like the Eagles and Chiefs have had, will that finally change the 49ers stance on drafting O-linemen early? I don't think it's going to change their stance on drafting O-linemen early. They've been willing to draft an O-lineman early, but they just have a really high standard for it. That was McGlinchey. If there's a tackle that's there at 11, Tim, that meets their qualifications, I think they'll do it. I just think that they're not going to change their standard, though. They're not going to change that really high standard. Whether I think you probably disagree with that a little bit. I'm neutral on it. We've talked about it last time. What do they do at number 11? Do they force a tackle pick, or do they go best player available? I think they'll probably go best player available. I think that you've been an advocate for them bending that a little bit just to replenish the pool at tackle, right?
That's accurate. I don't think they're going to, though. I think they're going to take a defensive lineman. It just feels like that to me. Maybe Tyler Warren as an exotic tight end recently. It's semantics. It's a little difference. It's just a focus. Like you want high standards, right? You want the guys who can fit in, and that they would draft Penei Sewell. It's been made very clear to me. They would have drafted, Alt from the Chargers, took in top 5 last year. Those were not available to them where they've taken. They just don't want to force a guy that everyone else has going to them. They don't feel it'll fit their system. Understand that. I do feel like you want talent, though. At some point, you just draft talent to have guys, to have options that you can move to different places. Lord knows they need a replacement at left tackle eventually for Trent Williams, and that you can't fake. And so I think at some point you do have to say, okay, we don't love this guy. We're not going to be at 11 again, we hope, for the next couple of years. We can't get this raw talent at 11, and maybe he's not perfect for us, but we coach him. I don't think they're going to do that. But I think we've seen the kind of deterioration of talent on the line. We see it in some of the red zone runs. We see it in some of the pass protection, specifically up the middle. But that tends not to be what they do. Again, I've had it explained to me. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying at some point you can't just become, okay, this guy's probably not the perfect guy for us, but his skill level is such that we'll never get a guy like this at 28, where we hope we're drafting. Hey, they hope they're drafting 32 every year. But that tends not to be where they are, and they'll go maybe draft a guy in the 4th or 5th round, and hey, they did well with Pony. Can't argue with that. I don't know that they think that means they got to draft guys in the 1st round. I don't sense that about them.
I wonder what they would have done had they not been able to trade for Trent Williams in 2020. That would have given us a lot more of a look and insight. The good news for the 49ers is that tackle wasn't as big of an issue this past year. I think thanks to the fact that Pooney helped out Colton McKivitz so much on the right side. McKivitz played average this past year, wasn't great, but he had been really a liability in 2023, and I that probably a lot of that was because the right guard wasn't good either, and Spencer Burford's. They had just an atrocious right side in 23. Dominic Pooney helped elevate not only the right guard position but also right tackle. And then even when Trent Williams was hurt, like they got decent play out of Jalen Moore. So I wonder if they wouldn't have been able to get Trent Williams in 2020 after Joe Staley retired. Would they have just tried to roll with these? At some point, I think because it's taken so long for guys like Moore and McKivitz to become viable tackles, even on a backup level. I mean, you'd think they would have had to take a bigger swing at some point, right? Well, I guess we'll just never know because they did get Trent Williams, and it's been able to mask that for so long. Speaking of big fish acquired in trades, we promised people we'd talk about this earlier. Myles Garrett requested the trade from the Browns, who are really in between a rock and a hard place right now. I get that it would be financially painful to trade Myles Garrett, but I think the Browns at some point need to admit their mistake with Deshaun Watson has crippled a half decade of football there. They're in cap hell. They've had to restructure all these contracts just to field a team because the $230 million guaranteed. Myles Garrett has realized it now. It probably took a couple of those Achilles tears from Deshaun Watson for Garrett to say, okay, wait, this team is not winning a Super Bowl anytime soon. So he goes out and requests a trade. The 49ers are near the top of the betting market right now as far as teams that can potentially land him. I mean, they're on the opposite side of the league. They have taken a massive swing before at an edge rusher in a trade. Remember Khalil Mack in 2018? They actually offered more than the Bears, but Mark Davis wouldn't trade with them. They have recently sent a ton of capital to the Panthers for Christian McCaffrey. So this front office has been aggressive. We expect them to at least investigate this. But just on a larger level, how do you think this turns out, Tim? Do you think that the Browns eventually do legitimately start listening to offers here, or are they just going to dig in? I don't think it's what's best for Cleveland here to dig in. I don't see a path to them winning a Super Bowl given the mess they're in with that Watson contract. But do you think their front office is ultimately going to see it the same way as Myles Garrett, and do you think they're going to entertain this trade request?
Well, I would agree with you. They should entertain it. They should shop them and get 3 first-round picks or whatever they can get. I don't think they're going to, though. Or at least white flag up. They're going to get, hey, we got all this talent. We get the right quarterback in there. We could still look at these good players, Joe Patonio and Ward and obviously Myles Garrett. We all know there's a ceiling to this, and it's a pretty middling ceiling for them. And then they could certainly drop down as they have in various years. I try to get the best for Myles Garrett. He's 30, right at the point where you go another year or two, it's a seriously declining value. I don't think they're going to, but if I'm the 49ers, and go for something, add some other things. This would be a good start for any kind of trade talk. We know they love going after. It's going to be tough to fit financially. That would be tough to fit financially because it's not just for this contract. You know that you would have to give him a new contract. So then you might have to pay him more than you paid Nick Bosa, at least on an AAV value, maybe not a long term. So you've got two of the most expensive players in football as your 2 defensive ends. The 2 great players. You sure would like your shot against anybody with those 2 guys. They'd have to figure out some financial stuff, though. That there would really be some consequences down the road on that one. But I know they're interested. Well, they should be interested because they've been interested in the past. I don't know that they're interested right now, but I'll just say somebody threw it out to me like a week ago. Like, hey, there might be some really good players available that haven't come out yet. And the 49ers might be in on this. And I was thinking like Trey Hendrickson, Max Crosby, and those might or might not be available. Myles Garrett is the top of that because Myles Garrett might be the best player, a defensive player in football, might be one of the top players in football overall. And the 49ers are always interested in those kind of guys.
Well,
and they don't often have the 11th pick. Like the 11th pick, this is why you make a trade now if you're Cleveland, because you trade for future picks. don't know 49ers have the 11th pick. You can get the 11th best player in the draft right now. It's pretty valuable start. And, obviously from the 49ers side, are you going to get anybody better at 11 than Myles Garrett? Of course you're not. So I think it would be a good start to a discussion. I think the 49ers would have that discussion. I think the Browns might get too stubborn and get too stupid and blow another year is how I'm feeling right now.
What's interesting to me is that, the 49ers were able to get 2 years, 2 seasons, not 2 full years, but essentially 2 seasons of Christian McCaffrey before they had to redo that pre-existing deal. Myles Garrett's got 2 years left on his contract. The way that he worded that, now that could have just been a bluff on his part. He might just want a new contract, and maybe he'll just end up signing one with Cleveland for all I know. But I mean, the way that he worded that, he was very adamant about the Super Bowl is really important to me. Well, sometimes, these players try to have their cake and eat it too. Well, if the Super Bowl and winning that's so important to you, maybe you can't, expect to go to a top level talent team and also get the largest contract at your position immediately. Like sometimes you've got to pick between one or the other. I think in the case of the 49ers specifically, look, they got all these really good players under contract, big money. They're about to pay Brock Purdy. Absorbing Myles Garrett at $35 million per year to match what Nick Bosa is paying probably isn't feasible, right? So if Garrett would be interested in that situation, I think like for the 49ers to make it work, he would have to play ball with them contractually. And whether that would mean waiting a year before an extension or playing on a deal, a restructured deal that's a little bit lower than top of the market. I don't know what that would be, but I just think that at some point having your cake and eating it too, if that's what Myles Garrett wants, I'm no clear indication that he wants that. I think at some point that would make a trade infeasible to a top team like the 49ers, right? So the Rams were able to get that was 1 year of Von Miller, right? Or half a year of Von Miller in 2021. It was a rental. They pushed it across to the Super Bowl, but they weren't able to give him a new contract, and the Rams had to go and reset after the next 2 seasons. I wonder if something like that would be on the table for Myles Garrett if he is sincere about I really want to get out of here to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, here's a question I can throw to 49ers fans. Would you give up the 11 pick and additional, maybe you wouldn't give up two number ones if it was a short term, but just for 1 year of Myles Garrett? 1 year. You get Myles Garrett, 1 year, let's roll it all out there, and you give up the 11th pick. Be interesting discussion. You wouldn't give up more than that because you wouldn't have him after this year. Or you have the thought of it, but in your mind, you're thinking, this is the year,
Yeah.
1 year. Would you
You're
do
thinking
that?
this is the year we can't pay him even though he's under contract after this year. Maybe you can
I
even
might do
trade
it if
him.
I'm the 49ers. I might do it, but it's an interesting discussion.
Well, so think of it, yeah, and all of this again would depend on Myles Garrett on if he's okay play. I think he's due like a $18 million option, but I think it's $5 million roster bonus plus like $13.4 million is due on September 1st. So he's due $18 more million for this season from the Browns, which obviously the 49ers would be able to afford that if he was willing to play ball and if he said, okay, I really want to win a title, but let's just scrap the last year of this deal if he gets traded, and I want to enter free agency after that. So that's the scenario that you'd be talking about. Would the number 11 overall pick be worth it? That would be then tantamount to what the Rams did in 2021 to get Von Miller. And I personally think that there's one position that it's not as valuable as quarterback, but can be thought of in the same breath, and that is the elite edge rusher position. Those guys can change games because they can directly counteract the quarterback in 2.5 seconds or less. And they already have one of those in Nick Bosa. If they got another one in Myles Garrett, you go back to it was just the 17th anniversary of the Giants making the Patriots 18-1 with the NASCAR package. That's a team that was able to win with that kind of monstrous front four. I think you would start talking about the defensive line. At this point, Tim, with all the heartbreak the 49ers have gone through in the Super Bowl, I would not be shocked if that was an opportunity that Myles Garrett presented and the Browns presented. Would not be shocked that the 49ers said, screw it, let's push the chips in and see what happens.
I would not be surprised if they would be very, very tempted by that. Absolutely. And listen, you went top of the market defensive things there in play there. And like you better win a Super Bowl, but you would be set up to get your best shot at it. And at times, the 49ers have really tried to, they try to trade for Beckham, Odell Beckham Jr. They've tried to do these sort of things. This one might be it. And you don't have, maybe you wouldn't say we absolutely won't have him after this year. You'll have to see how it happens. You basically would be a free agent. You have to deal with it. But man, that's the 49ers style. They like collecting. They got McCaffrey. They like collecting elite talents who can score touchdowns or sack the quarterback. That's what it's displaying to me. They value, and Chris Forster said it. They want guys who can tackle the quarterback or who can score touchdowns. And Myles Garrett can do one of them really, really well.
2 questions, rapid fire, and then we'll have answered everything. Now that Brant Boyer is here, do you see Anders Carlson coming in and competing with Moody? I see somebody competing with Moody. To me, that makes the most sense. You have Moody under contract, so it doesn't cost you anything on a 90-man roster to keep him, except for a 90-man roster spot. So, yeah, Anders Carlson kicked for the Jets, and he kicked for the Niners last year. Why not? And then any word on a new DB coach? D'Angelo Hall is interviewing this week. So if you have thoughts on any of those 2 questions, Tim, we could wrap up on that.
I am losing Wi-Fi here, so I'll be real quick. I think D'Angelo Hall is a real possibility as another defensive backs coach. Assuming Brandon Staley's out, they will need a Nichols back coach, I think. So I think you can see clearly how that would line up. And I liked Anders Carlson when he was here. I think he's better than Moody, I thought. But I think they're going to kind of have like a Moody plus others maybe contest in the spring into the summer. I would think Carlson would be somebody they should be very interested in bringing in. But I think Boyer, if he has got a great, I don't think Carlson kicked a lot for him, so we'll see. And I don't think it's a deep relationship there, but I'd sure be interested in seeing Anders Carlson get a real shot at it for sure.
He had a big leg. It was fun to watch. Yeah, you could just tell there.
He wasn't great at kickoffs, interestingly, but he was great at kicking 50-yard field.
Yeah, he made that one against the Chiefs to open the game. All right. Well, I know you're in Salt Lake City. You got the Warriors to cover. So thanks for tuning in from there or joining from there. Thanks to everybody for tuning in from wherever you might be. Everybody head to sfstandard.com. Tim's got a lot of good pieces up lately. I've got my State of the 49ers series going. We'll have that going through the NFL Combine. And then I think around that time is when things, if you thought it was interesting now, just wait. This offseason is going to be fascinating for the 49ers. So, some stuff has happened, but we still have a lot more to go. So thanks to Tim. I will talk to everybody soon. I see Tim's screen already turned off there. So go to sfstandard.com, check us out, and we will see you next time.